Good morning and welcome. My name is Michael Balsoni, and I have the privilege of being the principal at Apple Valley High School, a STEM school dedicated to academics, arts, and athletics. In addition to our audience in the gymnasium, we are live streaming this event to friends and family all over the world. Our annual Veterans Day ceremony was started under the leadership of former Principal Steve Degenar, and it is my honor to continue this tradition and MC today's event. Along with many of you, I share connections to the United States military. My grandfather served in the Coast Guard during World War II. My father served as a medic in the U.S. Army Reserve, and my father-in-law was a proud member of the United States Marines. This is a special day at AVHS. You will notice that the tone and the mood of this assembly are different from other school events. Today, we will recognize the core values of honor, sacrifice, and dignity. We want to give special thanks to the many veterans and active duty military personnel who are our guests of honor this morning. At this time, I ask that all veterans and active duty military personnel to please stand or wave and be recognized. It is now time for the posting of the colors, presented by Apple Valley American Legion Post 1776. Everyone, please stand if you are able. Please join the Valley Select Chorale as we sing our national anthem under the direction of Mr. Joel Byer.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Mr. Byer. Due to the Color Guard's busy schedule today, we will now retire the colors. Please remain standing. You may now be seated. I would like to introduce the special guests who will be speaking today. Our student speaker is AVHS senior Reagan Roloffs. Our keynote speaker this morning is Minnesota's 31st Adjutant General, Major General John Jensen of the Minnesota National Guard. Also joining us as honored guests are Apple Valley Mayor Mary Heyman Rowland, and also Director of Secondary Education, Dr. Mark Parr. Please let's give them a warm Apple Valley welcome to recognize the great work they do to support our school and community. Now, please join me in welcoming social studies teacher Mr. Dennis Drawn to the podium. Mr. Drawn is an infantryman in the Minnesota National Guard. He was recently recognized by the Minnesota Humanities Center as a 2017 Veteran Voices Award winner. This prestigious honor is given to active and retired Minnesota veterans for their positive impact and contributions to their community. Mr. Drawn will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you are able.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Drawn. At this time, we will hear another song by the Valley Select Chorale entitled Sure on This Shining Night by Morton Lauritsen, poetry by James Agee. Mr. Byer.
Sure on this shining night of star-made shadows round, kindness must watch for me this side the ground. The late year lies down the north. All is healed, all is health. High summer holds the earth, hearts all whole. Sure on this shining night, I weep for wonder, wandering far alone, of shadows on the stars.
What you just heard was a poem by American poet and author James Agee. He was a pilot in the U.S. Air Corps during World War II. He participated in the bombing of a city, and this violent experience affected him greatly throughout his life. In 1952, Agee flew in an airplane over the same city which was earlier destroyed. He saw the lights and the life come from that city that was once so desolate, and this emotion inspired the poem Sure on This Shining Night, that later became one of a set of poems called Lyric Verses.
Thank you very much to the Valley Select Chorale. Many of you here today belong to families who have a tradition of military service. This morning, we are fortunate to hear from 12th grader Reagan Roloffs, who will share some of her family's history with us. Reagan will be attending the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland next year. Please welcome her to the podium.
Veterans Day is a very special day where we as a nation get to recognize and honor those who have served or are currently serving in our United States military. Whether you served in the Navy, Air Force, Army, Marines, Coast Guard, or National Guard, today is when we all take a break from our busy lives and say thank you. My great-grandpa was a volunteer tank driver in the United States Army during World War II. He passed away a few years ago, and due to his belief of humbleness and feeling that it was something he just did and didn't need to be recognized for, he never shared any of his stories, except for one. One night, he shared one story with our family that I'd like to share with you. He was driving his tank in a small town in France when they were hit with an explosion. His commander called for an evacuation, and he was the last man out. When he reached the fence that he had seen men run to, he realized they were missing 2 other men. He ran back and found one who had been wounded, so he dragged him over to that fence, and once he got there, he ran back and found the second man. After bringing him back to safety with all the other men by the fence, they were safe. He also was involved in a crucial battle in France where he was wounded and sent back to England. Until the day he died, his body spit out shrapnel. His bravery earned him a Purple Heart, a Silver Star, 4 Bronze Star Service Medal, as well as many others, but he never shared that with anyone. His service was not about the recognition or the medals. He was simply serving his country. I can guarantee that all of you here today did not sign up for the medals or the numerous heroic stories. You signed up to support and defend this country. After high school, I've decided to attend the United States Naval Academy, where I will train to be an officer and leader in the military. This decision is a commitment not only for the 4 years that I will be attending the school, but also, as you already know, it is a commitment for life. It is a commitment to defend this Constitution and this country. There's no such thing as an ex-Marine, an ex-airman, an ex-sailor, or an ex-soldier. We will always be a part of the military family. Your service, whether you have stories like my grandpa or not, deserves to be recognized, and because you sacrificed so much for us. And I can say on behalf of every student, teacher, and administrator in this room, thank you.
Thank you, Reagan. We are proud of you and honored to have you speak to us this morning. Reagan's message reminds all of us just how we are connected by the common thread of military service to our country, past and present. November is Military Family Appreciation Month. Almost everyone in the gym this morning knows of someone who has current or past military experience. At this time, I invite all students with a grandparent, parent, guardian, relative, or friend serving in the country right now or in the past to stand and be recognized. We will now hear from Mr. Dazens and the Apple Valley High School Wind Ensemble. Their performance today is dedicated to the many lives that have been lost while serving our country. Today's performance will feature 3 movements in the form of a Requiem Mass. Please hold your applause until all 3 movements have been completed. The title of the piece conveys the message. Here's Grant Them Eternal Rest by Andrew Boysen, Jr. Mr. Dazens. Thank you, Mr. Dazens and the Wind Ensemble. This year's Veterans Day keynote address comes to us from Major General John Jensen, the Minnesota National Guard Adjutant General. He is the highest-ranking military official in the state, commanding over 11,000 soldiers and 2,000 airmen of the Minnesota National Guard. Major General Jensen has deployed to Kuwait, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and twice to Iraq. He is a resident of Apple Valley and an AVHS parent, father to senior Keely Jensen. We are honored to have him here at Apple Valley High School today to share a Veterans Day message with us. Welcome.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out today, especially to our veterans. But I do have to say, after our tremendous vocalists, our tremendous musicians performed today, I am certainly going to pale in their talents. That was inspiring. That was wonderful. And as you stand in this gymnasium and you see the championship banners and you experience the talent that our performing artists displayed today, you can't help but to be proud of this school, and you can't help to understand what a unique gem we have here in our community. So those of you sitting in the bleachers may not realize that today, but someday you will, what a unique and special gem this high school is. So I'd like to thank both of you, both of those groups for that. I'm honored, as all of our veterans are today, to be invited into your school and represent the 22 million veterans in the United States and the over 360,000 veterans in your state. But before I get to my message, there's a couple of things I do need to do. First of all, I'd like a quick shout out to the Apple Valley women's hockey team for last night, your 4-0 victory over Rochester. Nice job, ladies. I'm a proud hockey parent. Also to the class of 2018. Shortly you're going to be graduating. I know it may not feel like shortly, but you really are. Shortly you're going to be graduating. My advice to you today is to continue to work hard as you approach that date. Continue to reach for and achieve those goals that you have for you. Don't quit now. Continue to work hard. As mentioned, my daughter Keely is a senior in the Apple Valley High School class, and before I spoke here today, I asked Keely for some advice, as I normally do. Keely's always good for advice. She gave me 3 rules. Rule number 1 is, Dad, don't say work hard. We already know that. So I violated that already by my message to the class of 2018. She said, don't talk about yourself because that's boring. Well, I'm going to talk about myself a little bit today, so I apologize for being boring. And then, always her rule is this: Dad, don't be boring. So we kind of have this in my family. We kind of have this rule. When I get done speaking, I ask Ashlyn Hurd and Emma Vogel to saying whether or not I've been boring or not, because I can't trust Keely to tell me the truth. They will tell me the truth and provide the final analysis on the level of boredom this speech reaches. So today I've been asked to speak about Veterans Day and what it means to be a veteran. And I'll do that by telling you what I've learned from serving and living with veterans for the past 35 years and being a veteran myself. And in order to do that, I'd like to go back a little bit in time to May of 1962. Retired General Douglas MacArthur gave what is really one of the most famous speeches in American history. It was on the occasion of being awarded the Sylvanus Thayer Award from the Association of Graduates of the United States Military Academy that he gave a speech that today is known as the Duty, Honor, Country speech. Duty, Honor, Country is the motto of the United States Military Academy and the arch rival of the United States Naval Academy. And it was also the alma mater of General MacArthur. On the occasion of being awarded that prestigious award, he began by saying, duty, honor, country. Those 3 hallowed words will reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. Later in life, I would realize that these three words, duty, honor, country, helped define my character and defined me as a man, a husband, a father, a soldier, and a citizen. For I witnessed these three words lived out in front of me by veterans, a day-to-day example by the finest men and women I've ever had the privilege to be with. In the summer of 1983, I reported to initial entry training, or basic training as most of us know it. Me and my fellow privates were all a little frightened due to the uncertainty of things, the constant yelling of unfamiliar commands, and the intentional chaos that we couldn't escape. That was a normal experience. The Army of 1983 wasn't that far away from the Vietnam War, and its ranks still had Vietnam veterans. My basic training battalion was full of non-commissioned officers who had served in the Vietnam War. Sergeants Goins, McDaniel, and Hoy would soon teach me about duty. These three men lived through an experience that I would never encounter in my military career. These men who came home from Vietnam were not welcomed home with a thank you for your service. They were yelled at, they were cursed, they were called names, and in some cases, even spit upon. Upon arriving in the United States from service in Vietnam, these veterans were told to change out of their uniform to avoid any potential conflict with people who hated them. Hated them because of the Vietnam War. Hated them because our government sent them to war. Many of these men continued to serve their nation, being careful where they wore their uniform, being careful about exposing their military service. They continued to serve their nation, even when their nation placed no value on their service and their sacrifice. I remember their names: Sergeant Goins, McDaniel, and Hoy. I remember their duty, serving their nation, performing their duty, even when it wasn't popular or embraced by fellow Americans. Years later, this generation would teach me about honor. As I mentioned, the men and women who served in Vietnam came home to protest in a country that ignored their service. They were portrayed as crazed maniacs in movies and TV shows. Baby killer was a term that some of them heard. The idea of the Vietnam vet as a lurking threat to America and American freedom was a popular portrayal. Even some veterans organizations, our Vietnam veterans weren't welcomed in because they hadn't fought in a real war. If anyone had the right to turn their back on their country and become bitter, it was these men and these women. But they didn't. Following 9/11 and the mobilization of our military in wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, these men and women became our biggest supporters. They came out and thanked us, supported us, cheered us on, and ensured that we knew that we were appreciated. I will never forget their honor and the way they honored us. Honor even when America refused to honor them when they came home. These are honorable men and women sitting here in front of us, and I will never forget that. My sense of country and my love of country comes quite honestly from leaving the country. The United States Army has seen fit to deploy me on 4 occasions: Kuwait, Bosnia, and Iraq twice, and I spent 18 months as the Deputy Commanding General, U.S. Army Africa. And what I learned is this: I learned the most about my country and my countrymen and women when I was on these assignments. No matter where I went in the world as a service member, I encountered American citizens doing extremely hard things to make the world a better place. Whether it was the Peace Corps, the United States Agency for International Development, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, the International Red Cross, and countless other governmental and non-governmental agencies. For example, the young forensic archaeologist from Michigan State who was helping uncover a mass grave of murdered men and women and children in Bosnia, in an attempt to gain physical evidence to bring those responsible for those murders to justice. The many, many Americans I encountered in Africa who are working every day to end violence, poverty, sickness, and famine in unforgivingly difficult environments. I had to leave my country to appreciate what this country can be and what this country is. My character has been reverently shaped by duty, honor, and country. And today I ask, what has shaped your character? Who is shaping your character? What words would you use to describe your character? They don't have to be the same words as me, but someone or something is shaping your character. I was lucky. I had veterans shaping mine, and they continue to do so today. So again, on behalf of the 22 million veterans in the United States and over 360,000 veterans here in Minnesota, thank you for opening up your doors today and allowing us to come together to hear your talents and to give a small message on what it's like to be a veteran. Thank you.
Thank you. Major General Jensen's keynote address reminds us of the important values of our country. Our veterans everywhere have protected these values, and it is important to say thank you for their years of service to our country. Thanks again for this powerful message. At this time, I would like to bring Mr. Bill Blatzheim to the stage for the Armed Forces Salute. This is always a highlight of our program. Mr. Blatzheim.
We will now have a special musical salute as the Apple Valley High School Wind Ensemble plays the Armed Forces Salute arranged by Bob Loudon. During this performance, all 5 theme songs from the Army, the Coast Guard, the Marines, the Air Force, and the Navy will be played. To honor the veterans and active duty military personnel with us this morning, we ask that you stand when you hear your theme song. Mr. Dazens. United States Army. The United States Coast Guard. The United States Marine Corps. the United States Air Force, the United States Navy, Thank you to Mr. Dazens, the Wind Ensemble, and all of our veterans and active duty military.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bill Blatzheim. Today, Apple Valley High School is proud to pay tribute to the men and women who, throughout the ages of American history, have abandoned personal comforts, left their family and friends, sacrificed individual futures, and put their own lives on the line for the promise and potential of freedom. Today, we pay tribute to the men and women of the military who have stood proudly when world circumstances dictated that America needed those willing and able to enter the fray of battle. The choice to serve is the choice to willingly put your life on the line, and some soldiers, sadly, never make it back home. Let us honor all the fallen military men and women with a table of remembrance ceremony, followed by a moment of silence. During this moment of silence, taps will be played on the trumpet by Senior Molly Moynihan. It is appropriate to stand when taps begins if you are able. At this time, please welcome Cadet Captain Courtney Rogat to narrate the Table of Remembrance, followed by a moment of silence as we honor all the fallen men and women of our military. Courtney Rogat.
Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the front of our gathering. You may have noticed a table set before you. It is filled with symbolism. I will explain. This table is set for the prisoners of war and those missing in action from all wars. Today, there are approximately 86,000 POWs and MIAs. They are not with us today. Their chairs are empty, but saved for their hoped return. Let us remember their absence. Let us remember the United States Air Force. Let us remember the United States Army. Let us remember the United States Navy. Let us remember the United States Marine Corps. Let us remember the United States Coast Guard. And let us remember the military service civilians. Let us remember the men and women, prisoners of war from all branches of the service that are too often forgotten. Let us remember them. The tablecloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their intentions when responding to their country's call to arms, so that their children could remain free. Remember. The lone candle symbolizes the frailty of a prisoner alone, trying to stand up against his oppressors. Remember. The black ribbon on the candle reminds us of those who will not be coming home. Remember. The single red rose reminds us of the loved ones and families of our comrades in arms who keep the faith and await their return. Remember. A slice of lemon is on the bread plate to remind us of their bitter fate if we do not bring them home. Remember. There is salt on the plate, symbolic of the family's tears as they wait and remember. The glasses are inverted. They cannot toast with us tonight, maybe tomorrow, if we remember. The red, white, and blue ribbon is tied to the flower vase by a yellow ribbon that was worn by thousands who waited their return. Remember. The Bible represents the strength gained through faith in our country, founded as one nation under God, to sustain those lost from our midst. Remember. As we look upon this empty table, do not remember ghosts from the past. Remember our comrades. Remember those whom we depended on in battle. They depend on us to bring them home. Remember our friends. They are the ones we love, who love life and freedom as we do. They will remember what we do. Please honor and remember them. As the candle is extinguished, let us transfer its flame into our hearts and remember.
Thank you. You may be seated. Taps was just performed by trumpet player Molly Moynihan. Thank you, Molly. And thank you to Cadet Captain Courtney Rogat for narrating this ceremony. Courtney is a junior at Richfield High School. Today, there are more than 22 million living veterans. They are among our nation's finest citizens. On Veterans Day, we honor their solemn pledge and uphold their legacy by teaching younger generations about their role in securing the blessings of liberty. To give our students a sense of the history that is present on our gym floor today, veterans, will you please stand or wave if you were in service during the following major military conflicts? The Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan, the Gulf War, the Vietnam War, the Cuban Missile Crisis and/or the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, the Korean War, World War II, any other military conflicts not mentioned. Did you get them? We want to thank you all for everything you have done to secure our freedom and liberties. We would also like to thank Major General Jensen, Student Speaker Reagan Roloffs, the Apple Valley American Legion Post 1776, the Apple Valley Wind Ensemble, and the Valley Select Chorale. And for putting many of these details together and making this such a great event, the Apple Valley Student Council and Apple Valley staff members. And finally, thank you, of course, to all the veterans and active duty personnel who have come to Apple Valley today. You are all heroes. We are about to end this ceremony. I would like to ask the floor guests to stay seated until the students have left the gym. We will dismiss the student body in sections, not all at once, so please wait for my cue. Apple Valley High School students, your attentiveness this morning has been outstanding as usual. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for demonstrating the values of our Valley Vision today. Eagle Pride is alive and well. Students in the top half of the bleachers, you should wait a couple minutes before you get up to leave. Students in the lower half of the bleachers, you are dismissed. If you're on the north side of the gymnasium, please take a right and go towards the back hallways to get back to A Wing. You are dismissed now to your third hour classes. Thank you, everyone.